Arrested Development, television review. Okay, advance warning. I really don't have anything intelligent to say about this series. This isn't so much a review as it is me just saying this series was really great, it's really funny, I recommend it. Other than that, this is part of what I call my television addiction series, which if you missed the first video introducing that, I'll link it to the description I'll link it in the description down below. But basically this series is me going through all the DVD box sets I watched when I was in Cambodia from 2011 to 2013. And I was watching way too much TV, hence the name Television Addiction. And this was a show that definitely got me addicted. But I'll swing back to that in a moment, I guess. Maybe talk briefly about the background to this show or how I first heard about it. I don't want to talk too much about this show. I mean, this is a type of show where if you wanted to dissect it, you really could talk forever about it. But those videos are already out there on YouTube. And besides which, I suspect people watching this video are already familiar with this show and don't need much of an introduction to it. Although, I mean, let me know how accurate that prediction is. I mean, one thing I have discovered when doing these videos over the past few years is that you can't take anything for granted. The internet is a big place. People are coming from all different backgrounds and geographical regions, and maybe somebody hasn't heard about this show yet. I mean, by no means is it the case that everybody has watched this show. For example, I don't think my mom has ever heard about this show, but people who are on YouTube a lot, and the type of person who would watch a YouTube video like this is probably the type of person who already knows about this show. I think there's a big degree of overlap between YouTube users and people who are fans of this show, in other words. But the show came out, it was aired on network television from 2003 to 2006. It did not get high ratings at the time, but had a cult following. I actually wasn't aware of it at the time it was on TV, or was vaguely aware of it. I'll come back to that. But I think the popular wisdom is that one of the reasons that this show did not take off very well is because it was just slightly ahead of its time. So it was just slightly ahead of the age of serialized television. Serialized television took off in part because of streaming on the internet, which made it very easy to rewatch stuff, and the explosion of DVD sales, which made it very easy to rent stuff on the... Sorry, not DVD sales, because I think not many people actually buy a box set of a season unless they're already fans of that TV series, because those box sets can be expensive. But renting DVDs, and then kind of Netflix, when Netflix became popular. Even before Netflix was a streaming service, when you could get those DVDs sent out to you in the mail. And I think that's what made serialized TV so popular. Before those really took off, serialized TV was not popular because, you know, back in those old days, when you were just watching TV off of the network, and then if you missed an episode and there was a serialized story, well, then it was very difficult to catch up, and then you just said, nuts to it, I'm going to watch something else. And that's why serialized shows had a hard time maintaining an audience. And then this was a sitcom. It was a comedy show, but it was a serialized show. And so I think the popular wisdom is because it was just slightly ahead of the boom in serialized TV shows, it had a very hard time maintaining an audience because it was one continuous story. Each episode picked up where the last episode left off. It was somewhat a satire on a soap opera. soap opera, and I believe people on the internet say that it was either influenced by or it had the predecessor of a show called Soap, which was from the late 70s, early 80s, which was a parody of soap operas. Soap was slightly ahead of my time. I was alive in the late 70s, but just born, so wasn't watching soap opera parodies at the time. I do vaguely remember it because it was rerun on Nickelodeon, Nick at Night, back in the mid 90s or something like that. I don't think I ever watched it. But Arrested Development was a similar format, where it was parodying a soap opera. So it was kind of soap opera type plots, but done for comic effect, as well as just, a lot of gags and sitcom gags and running gags. I was, during the years where this was on TV, 2003 to 2006, I was living in Japan for most of that time, and so was largely out of it. I mean, I'm still out of it to a degree. I'm still living abroad. But nowadays, popular culture has shifted so much to the internet. And that wasn't as true back in 2003. There wasn't Facebook or YouTube or any of this stuff. I had email. There was still, there was still stuff on the internet if you could find it, but it wasn't as ubiquitous. So it was a lot easier back then to be out of it. And yeah, I was. Those were years when I largely missed out on pop culture, at least in terms of television. The big shows I heard about, but not the cult shows, and this was one of them. And then when I first heard people talking about it, Arrested Development, I thought they were talking about the band. And I suspect I'm not the only one who's made that mistake or who's had that confusion, right? I mean, especially when you were first hearing about this show, right? Wasn't it easy to get it confused with the band? In fact, I'm still a little bit amazed that they went ahead and named it Arrested Development, because there was already a band with that name, which wasn't super famous, but was famous enough and had a cult following, and that band had been famous through the 90s. So it was, and the show only started in 2003, so it was just after that band had been kind of at the height of its fame. And then to make it even more confusing, the band was kind of a cult following, people who liked the band. I mean, they had a couple mainstream hits, but it was mostly a cult following. And the show, certainly when it was starting off, had a cult following. So it was, a bunch of people who were talking about Arrested Development as if it was the greatest thing ever. And you weren't quite sure if they were talking about the band or the TV show. And it's such a distinctive name as well. I'm a bit surprised that the network executives or somebody didn't say no. This is going to cause brand confusion, because they're worried about brand confusion, right? Nobody said this is going to cause brand confusion. We're going to go with a different name. It's too much of a unique name and it's already associated with that band. Now, I do get that name is absolutely perfect for this TV show because it's so perfectly encapsulates the mood of the show or the characters on the show, where they are all stuck in that stage of arrested development. But still surprised they didn't go with a different name. But anyways, after it got off the network, the show was kind of gaining in popularity and word of mouth steadily throughout the years ever since, and DVD sales and Netflix, etc. So by the time I got around to seeing it in about 2012, by that point it had been recommended to me by several people that I knew and was also famous on the internet. So I got the DVD series in Cambodia and watched it, and once I popped in the season 1 DVD, episode 1, I was hooked. I just could not stop watching it. And in fact, I watched the whole thing, all 3 seasons, over a 3-day weekend, which I'm not proud of. And it's not something I plan to do. You know, it's a classic case of, we had a 3-day weekend coming up. It was a holiday weekend in Cambodia. And I didn't have any travel plans, but I thought, right, I'm not going to go traveling. I'm going to use this time productively, start getting in shape, get things organized in the apartment, catch up with some of these projects I've been meaning to do. And yeah, classic. Didn't do any of it. Just watched TV for 3 days straight. So this ties back into the whole theme of this whole series, which is television addiction, or my inability to pry myself away from the TV, which is, in one case, my own unique pathology, my own unique problem. But in another case, I think this is a problem that a lot of us struggle with, maybe. I mean, binge watching is now a thing, and I certainly binge watched this TV show. In my defense, it is so incredibly addictive once you start with it. I mean, it's funny. It's the gags are kind of zinging by at a good rate. That's makes it very easy to just kind of sit back and just kind of absorb all of it, and it caters to short attention spans, and again, the sense that the jokes are kind of coming very, very quickly. And then there's the long-running soap opera type plot, which makes it so that when you finish one episode, it's always on kind of a bit of a cliffhanger, and you're like, okay, I've got to see where they're going with this, which makes it all too easy to just press play on the next episode. And I just did not pry myself away from the TV and spent 3 days watching it. And again, I'm not proud of this. I'm not proud from a number of angles. One, this was about 8-9 years ago now. So, you know, I kind of look back on this with regret over a wasted youth. I wasn't exactly young then, but I was younger then than I am now. And I think, geez, how little I've accomplished with my life. What I wouldn't give back for some of that time that I just wasted watching TV. I mean, even at the time, I was kind of filled with self-loathing for the fact that I had spent all weekend watching it. But I mean, even aside from that, I think I would have appreciated this show better if I had been able to space it out a little bit. Because, I mean, there's a couple disadvantages of binging it all in one weekend. One is that when you binge watch a show, it's very easy to forget it all. The shows you remember best are the shows that you kind of watch for 1 week and then have time to think about it, or time to anticipate what's going to happen next. As you would have done had you watched this show in real time back in 2003 when it was first on TV. But the other thing is, I think, you know, as funny as it was and as addictive as it was, I think it would have been more enjoyable in small doses. When you just binge the whole thing, your brain is just turning to mush. And I could appreciate that there were funny jokes being said on the screen, but you know, I wasn't laughing as hard after 4 hours of watching the TV as I was during the first hour of watching TV. The humor has diminishing returns, and you don't appreciate it as much. So that confession aside, it is a terribly funny show. It's got a lot of actors who are just pitch perfect for the role they're in. Everybody is really funny in this show. This show is, by the way, when I first became a big fan of David Cross, I shouldn't say big fan, because it's not like I've tracked down everything he's done or something like that, but I first became appreciative of David Cross. Before then, I knew who he was, but I was largely, I didn't really care that much. But now, after I've seen this, I think, David Cross, he is a funny guy. And, you know, if I know he's in something, I'll be more likely to check it out. For example, a subsequent TV show he did, The Increasingly Poor Decisions of Todd Margaret, is something that I went through the trouble of tracking down and watching just because David Cross was in it and because I remembered him from Arrested Development. He's got what starts out as a minor role, but then expands throughout the series, and I thought he was brilliant in it. Will Arnett is brilliant in it. Everyone's brilliant in it. There are people in this series, and again, because I got around late to seeing this series, there are a couple people who became famous because of this series, like what's the name of that kid? Michael Cera, right? The kid who was in Superbad and some other movies. I think this TV show is how he got famous, and it is a classic case of, you know, like I was hearing his name, I was seeing him in movies, he was popular, everyone likes him, and I was like, where did this kid come from? Why is he famous? And then I discovered Arrested Development. I'm like, oh, right, okay, so this is a TV show he's from. Now, as I said before, I did largely spoil this show for myself by watching it all in one weekend and then forgetting large chunks of it. But in the years since then, I'll catch bits and pieces of it on YouTube. And every time I do, I'm just reminded of the brilliance of this show. And sometimes I find myself going down the YouTube hole, watching more and more clips of Arrested Development, being like, oh yeah, I vaguely remember that storyline, or I remember that gag. And yeah, seeing it again on YouTube makes me realize once again what a very funny show it was. Now, fans of the show, of course, will tell you about all the running gags and geniuses, the foreshadowing and the post-shadowing, the callbacks to earlier gags, the things like the Happy Days themes or the cameos, and yeah, there's tons to talk about. But I'm going to call this review good here because number one, there are already plenty of videos on YouTube dissecting this TV show, and number two, I mean, there's no point really in explaining all the jokes or all the running gags. It's funny. It's a comedy. It's a comedy that actually works. The jokes are actually funny, and go watch it. And that's really all you need to say about this TV show. Is just, if you haven't checked it out yet, go check it out.